These scriptures bringing these laws to remembrance. Ya'oh says only a remnant gon' hit a call, but are you chosen? Yashai-Ya'oh that gon' test the hearts of those who join him. So you can find me standing with those who wish to keep the commandments, and at war with all those who say we can't do, only examine. I was just like you, I played the fool, the lure by propaganda, asking questions led me to Ya'oh. No one else had the answer. Halalo av Ya'oh, sorry, I gotta let out the bar. When you see all these obstacles in front of you, just depart. Halalo av Ya'oh, sorry, I gotta let out the bar. When you can break these scriptures down and actually save your brother's heart. So just hold off on popping champagne. We still here in the fire. Being correct throughout our campaign shows what Ya'oh requires.
Hana, Shamtecha, Lamorach, Harotz Chadash, Baal, Pepeoth, Tadosh Harem, Watadak, Wa Gabayot, Cha Matzdashem, Tazaram, Wa Roch Tasham, Wa Saira Tapetotam, Wa Atha, Tagel Baya'oh, Ba Kadosh Ya'oh Sha'al, Tathalal, Haganeem, Wa Ha'abeonem, Mabakashemem, Wa En, Lashonam Batsam Nashatha, Ane Ya'oh, Ainam, Allah Ya'oh Sha'al, La Izabam, Apathach Gal Shepe'em Naroth, Wabatoch Bakayot, Ma'enof, Ashem Madbar, La Agamem, Wa Arat Seh, La Motse'emem, Atan Bamadbar, Araz, Shata, Wahadas, Wahat Shaman, Ashem Bagharaba Barosh Tadar, Wata Ashur Yachado, Lamain, Yara'o, Wayadai'o, Wayashemo, Wayashchelo Yacharoche, Yad Ya'oh, Rashata Za'ath, Wakadosh, Ya'oh Sha'al, Baraha, Karabo, Rabcham, Ya'amar, Ya'oh, Hagesho, Ratzamotecham, Ya'amar Malach, Ya'oh Rakab, Yagesho, Wayagero Lano, Atashatak Rena Harashanoth, Mahana, Hagero, Wanashema, Labno, Wanadai, Acharetan, O Haba'oth, Hashmeino, Hagero, Ha'atheoth La'achor, Wanadai, Che'alaim Atham, Up, Te Table, Watharayo, Wa Nashathai, Wanar'ah Yachado, Han, Atham Ma'en, Wapacham Ma'apas, Thoiba, Yabachar Bacham. Shalom Lacham, Ya'oh Sha'al B'Matzreim Mashna, Ba'Babel Mashna, Ba'Ashur Mashna. Chol Gam Ya'oh Ba'aretz Acharath Aratz HaMatzor. Madabar La Yada'im Ath Shapah HaBarora, Zaharet Wanachanete Chorash. Chabad Ya'oh Eshkatsato, Mamazrach Ma'aratz Marachak. Kol Kor B'Madbar, Pano Darach Ya'oh, Yasharo Ba'Gharaba Masla La'Allah Eno. Waza Chalach Mar'a HaShaleshe, Lahach Resho Ale E'em, Patharon HaChazon Basapah HaNabi Yashai-Ya'oh, Chal Parak Arba'im Wa'achab. This is part 3 of Keep Quiet Before Me Islands, a breakdown of the vision in the book of the prophet Yashai-Ya'oh, the entire 41st chapter. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 yet, I strongly encourage you to do so before watching part 3, which will cover verses 15 to 24. As in part 2, I'm going to speed things up a bit and not go too deep into the grammar aspects of the text, but for those who want the grammatical breakdowns, you are invited to come to class. There is a Zoom class every Shabbat day that I teach, as well as classes held during the week. Simply go to our website, www.yaohsha'al.com, for more information. Verse 15. Hana shamtecha la morak charotz chadash baal pepeoth. First word, hana, is the prolonged demonstrative particle used for pointing things out. Next word, shamtecha. Shamtecha, perfect tense verb in the first person with a pronominal suffix in the second person, masculine singular. I have made you. Next is la morag, which is the noun morag with a preposition prefix. La morag means for a threshing tool. Charotz is the word for sharp. Chadash is the word for new. Behold, I have made you for a threshing tool, sharp, new. The adjectives sharp and new come after the noun morag they describe, whereas in the heathen's English, adjectives precede the noun. Baal pepeoth means a lord of two edges. Next clause, Tadosh harem watadak. Thadosh harem wa thadak. You will thresh mountains, and you will pulverize. Last clause of verse 15. Wa gabayoth chamatz tashem. Wa gabayoth chamatz tashem. And high hills like chaff you will make. Verse 16. Tha zaram waruch tasham. Tha zaram waruch tasham. You will fan them, and wind will carry them off. Wa sira the petzotham. Wa sira the petzotham. And tempest will scatter them. Wa atha tagel ba-Ya'oh. Wa atha tagel ba-Ya'oh. And you will rejoice in Ya'oh. Bakadosh Ya'oh Sha'al Tathalal. Bakadosh Ya'oh Sha'al Tathalal. In the Holy One of Ya'oh Sha'al will you praise one to another. In the last video, we ended by talking about how the true people of this book, the so-called Israelites, Ya'oh Sha'al in the pure language, they are supposed to be identifiable as a defenseless worm in the world until they have an exodus out of the lands of their punishment in the west, where they were brought by ships to be slaves in the land of the pyramids, and they migrate to the islands of the Far East, where they will renew their power. Calling them a worm is meant to be both an insult and also a description of their condition at the bottom of the barrel, and with the crabs in the bucket mentality. But once the worm has relocated to a new environment in the islands of the East, the worm is going to be transformed into a weapon of mass destruction, a weapon that will cut down mountains and high hills. This is a reference to nations and how the worm is going to bring them down. Let's clarify that the threshing tool of the prophecy is not to be confused with the heavy threshing sledge board which a farmer drags over stalks spread out across the threshing floor to loosen grain from husks. A threshing sledge poses no threat to a mountain or a hill. The tool in question is a very different kind of farmer's tool. The imagery is that of an iron pickaxe with a long handle and at right angles to an iron bar having a sharp pointed edge at one end and a sharp chisel edge or another sharp pointed edge at the other end. This tool, and not the threshing sledge, is the kind of tool you'd use to break up rocks in earth. But like most handheld objects, it can easily be appropriated as a weapon. But how does the worm manage to do this? How does the worm become a threshing tool that can cut down mountains? We know that the worm has to extricate itself from the environment that is geared towards making sure that the worm stays a worm, forever emasculated, powerless, subservient, and weak. The worm has to leave, not just move to a different state or buy land in a remote area of the same country, but exit the entire country. We cannot build ourselves up anywhere within the boundaries of our oppressor's stolen land. History has taught us that over and over and over again. If you believe in the prophets of Ya'oh, the prophets of this book, then you know the destiny of the worm is not just to build itself up to be a prosperous nation. The destiny of the worm is to bring down powerful nations on its way to the top. It cannot do that by learning how to shoot a pistol, or joining a gun club, or forming a militia and stockpiling military-grade weapons. The worm does not thresh mountains that way. The worm becomes a simple farmer's tool, not a tank, not a fighter jet, not a nuclear missile. The pickaxe is not a conventional weapon. The pickaxe represents nature, weaponized nature. Other than mere cloud seeding, which is the artificial technology that creates rainfall, no nation on earth has the ability to weaponize nature and call forth a Category 5 hurricane on demand and aim that storm at a specific target. No nation has that capability, but the worm will. The race to manipulate weather and geological hazards has been ongoing since the 1950s, but no nation has been able to weaponize earthquakes, tornadoes, typhoons, or meteor impacts. But imagine if a nation could do those things. Just imagine if a nation suddenly appeared on the world stage with the power at its disposal to create catastrophic events through natural processes. The world would be at the mercy of that nation. Even the most powerful nations, which are the mountains and the high hills of this prophecy would be defenseless. Conventional modern warfare, thermonuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles, aircraft, drones, battleships, submarines, all of it becomes obsolete and ineffective against a nation controlling the forces of nature. The brass ring of military geophysics is the unprecedented ability to tap the forces of nature on a massive scale and trigger natural catastrophes with devastating human consequences. It cannot be coincidence that the prophets of Ya'oh, such as Yashai-Ya'oh, foresaw thousands of years in advance that their nation would one day possess this ability. And here we are in the 21st century, and we see nations taking environmental warfare seriously, believing that it is well within their grasp, and they are actively trying to beat each other to the finish line of making environmental cataclysms a part of their arsenal. The nation that is able at will to trigger vast cataclysmic events, that nation will trump any nuclear-armed nation. This prophecy we are reading now is saying that that nation will be the worm that has moved to the islands of the east to renew their power. That's how the worm becomes a threshing tool that levels mountains. Wind and tempest, i.e. natural disasters, will be unleashed by Ya'oh upon the powerful nations of the world at the word of his people who will be in the wilderness. Wahe, Nabatay Patha Magam Ya'oh, Tzaba'oh, Nabakan, Baraim, Wabaraish, Wakol Gadol, Sopa, Wasara, Walab, Ash, Ochala. Verse 17. Ha-ghane'em wa-ha-abeonem mabakashem-mem wa'en. The oppressed ones and the needy ones, the ones seeking water, and there is none. Lashonam batsam nashatha. Lashonam batsam nashatha. Their tongue in thirst has dried up. Ane Ya'oh ainam. Allah Ya'oh sha'Allah izabam. I, Ya'oh, will respond to them. The higher power of Ya'oh Sha'al, not will I abandon them. He just told you in verses 15 and 16 that his plan is to put wind and tempest, the forces of nature, in the hands of the worm once the worm has migrated to the islands of the east. He is well aware of what that must sound like to you in your present condition as a worm. You're thinking this must be some kind of joke. There's no way this can be real. There's no way that the Almighty is real and this is what he's going to do. It is not even remotely plausible to think that this could actually happen, but it is. Verses 17 and 18 show us that he anticipated your reaction, so he's telling you these words. You are oppressed ones. You are needy ones, the Obeonim. You are seeking water and there isn't any to be found. Your tongue has dried up because of thirst. You are a worm. But if you obey him and you go to the islands of the east where he is telling you to go, you are not going to be oppressed ones anymore. You are not going to be needy ones anymore. You are not going to be thirsty anymore. He has not abandoned you. When you call him, he will answer. That's his word, not mine. I'm just a messenger. Verse 18. Apathach gal shepe'em na'aroth. I will open rivers upon high lookouts. Wapathoch b'kayoth ma'enoth. And fountains in the midst of plains. Ashem madbar la'agamem. I will make the untamed land for a pool of water. Wa'aratz tzeh lamotze'emem. And a land of solitude for springs of water. The word madbar in this verse is usually translated as wilderness in the heathen English Bibles, and that translation is not inaccurate, but it is somewhat misleading. Madbar means untamed land, a land that is not developed yet by people. It is untouched. The other word in this verse that we need to clarify is the word tseh, which is translated as dry land in the Queen James Virus, and this is definitely incorrect. This word means an isolated area, a secluded area, a place of solitude. It's not a desert, but it's not easy to get to either. It's off the beaten path. In other words, you are heading to the islands of the East, and more specifically to a secluded and isolated area on one of those islands, an area of land that has not been developed by people. It is unoccupied land waiting for you to move in and to develop it. His promise to you is that he is going to open up water sources, rivers, fountains, and springs. These are all references to resources, not literal H2O, but material wealth that will begin to transform the worm and renew its power. Again, he is reassuring you because he knew what would be going through your mind when you finally hear and understand what he's been saying all along in this chapter. He knew it would be an eye-opener and that you would need to be encouraged and reassured. Verse 19. Athan b'madbar araz shata w'hadas wa'ratz shaman. I will give in the untamed land the araz, the shata, and the hadas, and the ratz shaman. Ashem ba'gharaba barosh thadar wa tha'ashur yachado. I will put in the unoccupied land the barosh, the thadar, and the tha'ashur together. This verse and the next one are some of my favorites. What we have is a list of 7 different trees. The araz is the cedar tree, the shata is the acacia tree, the hadas is the myrtle tree, the 4th tree is the ratz shaman, which means oil tree, but this is not the name of any known tree in the scriptures. The olive tree has a different name, and oil can also be extracted from several different kinds of trees besides olive trees. I'll come back to this in a moment. The barosh is the cypress tree, the thadar is the oak tree, and the tha'ashur, the last tree, the 7th tree, is the buxus tree or the box tree. He is putting 7 kinds of trees in the same untamed, undeveloped, and unoccupied land in the islands of the Far East, where he is telling his chosen remnant to go. Why? Because he's planting a garden in the East once again. But this time, it's not a garden of literal trees. He's planting a garden of people. The 7 trees are 7 assemblies of people that he is going to establish and organize in the wilderness. It is the foundation and the foothold of the kingdom on earth. It begins in the wilderness, just like the first kingdom of Ya'oh began in the wilderness when Moshe reared up the wilderness tabernacle. If we look back at history for a moment, in the first wilderness, the camp of Yashai-Ya'oh was divided into 5 campsites, with the tribe of Loeh having its own set-apart campsite near the tabernacle in the middle of the other 4 campsites, as they were the priesthood of the nation. The eastern campsite was the campsite of Yehudah, aka Judah. The southern campsite was the campsite of Rehoboam, aka Reuben. The western campsite was the campsite of Aparim, aka Ephraim, and the northern campsite was the campsite of Dan. Each of the 4 campsites surrounding the area of the tabernacle contained 3 tribes each. This was the tribal organization and camp setup during the 40 years of the first wilderness period. But after the nation crossed the Yarden River and conquered the land of Canaan, and after the tribes inherited their own tribal lands, the tribes who shared a common border began to be paired up, and 7 tribal assemblies emerged. Yehudah with Benjamin, Dan with Asher, Zabulon with Naphtali, Aparim with Manasseh. The tribe of Shemayon was initially within the territory of Yehudah west of the Yarden River, but they later moved eastward and shared a common border with the tribe of Ra'oban on the eastern side of the Yarden River. The tribe of Gad and Yashai shared a common border along the Yarden River itself. The Loam, the tribe of Loe, did not inherit any land, so they were a landless assembly unto themselves. The 7 trees that we are reading about now, they represent the 7 assemblies of the 12 tribes plus Loe, 13 tribes total. It is a garden that Ya'oh is going to plant in the east, in the second wilderness. He is telling us how each of the tribes will settle their part of the untamed and unoccupied land with respect to each other and with respect to the tabernacle that will be reared up in their midst at the center of their camp and their city. As in the first wilderness, the camp will have 5 separate campsites for the 13 tribes, but with 7 interlocking assemblies. 3 assemblies will be in 3 campsites, and 3 assemblies will be in 2 different campsites, and Loe will have its own assembly in its own campsite. Verse 20. Laman Yara'oh wa Yadai-oh wa Yashemo wa Yashchelo Yachado. So that they will see, and they will know, and they will consider, and they will understand together. You see, these are just words right now. Just words. All this talk about building a nation in the islands of the Far East, with the tribes encamped around a tabernacle gilded with pure gold like the days of old. These are just words right now. But when these words come to pass, when this garden of 7 trees is planted and growing in the wilderness, when it begins to happen, his people who are there to witness it with their own eyes, their zeal and their love for him will go through the roof. Because together they will understand. What will they understand? Yashai-Ya'oh Rashat Azaath Wakadosh Ya'oh Sha'al Baraha. For the hand of Ya'oh has done this. And the Holy One of Ya'oh Sha'al, he has created it. Ya'oh did this, not man, not a ravenous bird in the east. Ya'oh alone, Ya'oh himself. His handiwork will be undeniable. 7 is also important for another reason. 7 is the number of candlestick branches on the golden menorah. And the menorah belongs in one place and one place only. And that is inside the tabernacle. Remember the Ghatz Shaman, the oil tree, which I said earlier does not represent any specific species of tree. It's the 4th tree of the 7 trees because it represents the menorah's middle candlestick, the set apart candlestick, which bears up the other 6 candlestick branches. The Ghatz Shaman, the oil tree, is the tribe of Loe, the priests, and the 6 other trees are 2 tribes each. The golden menorah represents our nation, but the flames have been extinguished by the curses and the punishments that we had to endure. But we are being told by Ya'oh through his prophet that he is going to reignite the flames of the menorah and put his people back together again in a land of their own, in a city of their own, with 5 campsites and 7 interconnecting assemblies in the wilderness, which is an archipelago of islands in the east, where his name is now being reproclaimed by a ravenous bird. It will be the city of Ya'oh, and it cannot be his city if he doesn't have a house there. The tabernacle of Ya'oh, his house, is going to be rebuilt in the wilderness, and his people will encamp around it like the days of old, and they will rejoice because Ya'oh will dwell among them once again. And you better believe the forces of nature will be obedient. Kome wadoshe batseon, che karanach Hashem barazal, wa parastech Hashem nachosha, wa hadkoth ramem rabem, wa hachramte leYa'oh batsaim, wa chelam la'adon chal ha'aratz. Verse 21. Karabo reibcham Ya'amar Ya'oh. Hagesho ratzamothecham Ya'amar Malach Ya'oh Rakab. Come near, the one contending with you, will Ya'oh say. Cause to approach the strong quarrelers of you, will the king of Ya'oh say. Verses 21 to 24 are full of so much power and awe that I pray that my explanation that follows does them justice. I pray that Ya'oh is pleased with what I'm about to say. In verse 21, the Supreme Being is basically looking into the future and seeing that his word about what is going to happen is going to come under ridicule and attack. And verses 21 to 24 are his little message in a bottle to those attackers, because the ridiculers and the mockers are going after the people from whom Ya'oh is going to extract his remnant. Everything that I have said in these past 3 videos about this chapter in the book of Yashai-Ya'oh has never been said or taught by anyone before. It's not something that I figured out on my own. It's what Ya'oh told me. If I'm wrong, then it was not Ya'oh who was speaking to me and by me. If I'm right, then that means that everything that I've said is going to come under serious criticism and attack. No one has really needed to throw any darts at chapter 41 of Yashai-Ya'oh before, aside from the typical criticisms given to the entire book as a whole. All that changed since I began teaching that this chapter is talking about an exodus to the east by descendants of the slaves shipped to the Americas. Now, all of a sudden, the message of chapter 41 is under serious attack. For those of you who do not believe in the Supreme Being and think all of this is just religious nonsense and a waste of time, I would just caution you to take into consideration the fact that everything that exists has its opposite. Light, dark, hard, soft, big, small, day, night, rich, poor, better, worse, backward, forward, early, late, etc., etc., etc. I mean, I can go on and on and on. That being said, it is not logical to question the existence of a supreme intelligence, since no one in their right mind questions the existence of supreme stupidity. If the latter exists, and it most certainly does, then its opposite must also exist. You may not like the way the Supreme Being behaves, but that's irrelevant to the question of his existence. A Supreme Being chooses to do and to be whatever he wants, whether you like it or not. He does not care what grade you give him. Your opinion simply does not matter. If you are a Supreme Being, it means you can choose to peek into the future, see what's going to happen before it happens, and if you want, you can change things and predetermine how you want things to happen. Or, since you are a Supreme Being, sometimes you can choose not to look into the future and just let yourself be surprised as events play themselves out. A Supreme Being has that prerogative, and we see the Supreme Being, whose name is Ya'oh, the only Supreme Being there is, exercising both prerogatives in the scripture. A Supreme Being is always in complete control of everything. His creation can never outsmart him, never outthink him, and never put him in checkmate. Nothing happens in his creation unless he either allows it to happen or he is causing it to happen. Why am I saying all of this? It's because, as I said earlier, no one before me thought chapter 41 of this prophet's book was saying what I am teaching now. And the mockers and the ridiculers have launched fresh attacks. And there is no name among the plethora of names being attributed to the Supreme Being that has ever experienced the kind of ridicule and blasphemy as the name that I proclaim from the East. The name he told me in 2012, and then after 5 years of study and reflection had me go public in 2017. That name is Ya'oh. Verse 21 is a summons to the mockers and the naysayers. Step forward, please, and let's have a little chat. Because Ya'oh knew in advance that attacks would be launched on his name and on his prophetic statements about the future. Verse 22. Yagesho wa yagero lano athashata grena hara ashanoth mahama hagero wa nashema labno wa nadai acharethan o habaoth hashmeaino Let them approach, and let them tell to us that which will happen. The first things, what are they? Tell, and we may put to our mind, and we will know the end of them. Or the things coming, cause it to be declared to us. In other words, since you reject what I'm saying about the future, and you don't think I know what I'm talking about, then please, if you would be so kind, you tell us what is about to happen if you know. What I find humorous about this advanced challenge from the Supreme Being is that the mockers are not going to say what the future holds. All they are going to do is reject and throw mud on what Ya'oh says about the future. That's what mockers do. They don't get inside the ring. No, 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 no. They throw eggs and tomatoes from a safe distance. They'll say, whatever the future is, it's not going to be that crap that you just tried to feed us. That's what mockers do. They will never have an alternative or a viable plan of action going forward. They're just going to make fun and dismiss what you are saying. Verse 23. Hagero wa'atheoth la'achor wanadai che'alaim atham. Ap thetebo wa tharayo wa nashathai wa nar'a yachado. Tell the things to come hereafter, that we may know that you are gods. Indeed, you will do good and you will do evil, that we may gaze and that we may observe together. Another tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic challenge from Ya'oh, the Supreme Being, to the naysayers, but also one he knew they would never man up and do. The self-proclaimed conscious people and the self-proclaimed enlightened and the awakened, those claiming to be gods, they will never do what he is challenging them to do here. They cannot call forth and determine good things to come in the future like he does, nor can they determine what evil things will happen in the future like he does. If they could, they would, so that we would all know for a fact that they are what they claim themselves to be, and that the BS rubbish they push is actually valid. Verse 24, last verse for this video. Han, atham ma'em, wapailcham ma'apas, tho I ba yabachar bacham. Behold, you are all from nothing, and your work is from nothingness. A piece of filth will choose you all. This is something that many folks are not going to be able to wrap their heads around because they have been fed lies about the Supreme Being, especially in the churches. Here he is in this verse, resorting to ad hominem attacks and even name-calling. Now, the naysayers will be quick to object that this is clearly an anthropomorphism, a human characteristic being attributed by humans to their imaginary deity in the sky. This is not the way a Supreme Being would ever talk and behave. Clearly, this is a case of God being made in man's own image. No, it isn't. It's a case of the Supreme Being acting like a Supreme Being and doing whatever he wants, which now happens to be using insults, inflammatory ad hominem, and name-calling to express his displeasure and his utter disgust. But wait, there's more. The word thoai-ba in the pure language is the equivalent to an expletive in the heathen's English that I will not repeat in this video. But the viewer should know that it has the same impact as that expletive when it's being used pejoratively. Thoai-ba is the equivalent of excrement coming out of your rectum. The Supreme Being considers you to be the same as excrement from the rectum if you choose the naysayers and their opinion over his word via his prophets. He is using the word thoai-ba pejoratively. Why is he so angry? It's because he knows that many of his own people are going to choose the naysayers over him. And that choice is going to necessitate him destroying them, just like you do when you flush excrement down the toilet. Ba kharab yamoto khol khata'e ghameh ha'amarem la tagesh taqdem ba ghedeno harai